Another question you'll be asked when reviewing Concept 4 is to graph a system of inequalities, which is two expressions that have greater than or less than symbols that have a kind of overlapping solution region that we can more clearly see when we graph them each separately and shade them each separately so we can see where their shading overlaps. We're going to start with the first one. Y is less than or equal to negative x plus 4. Assuming we'll deal with the less than or equal to at the end, let's start with the y-intercept, which is always the number at the very end, not attached to a variable. That means positive 4 is our y-intercept. So on the y-axis, we go up 4 and make our initial dot. From there, the slope is always the number next to x, and it's given to us as a fraction. If you don't see anything written there, remember there are a couple of numbers that are technically there that we can't see. First of all, any x by itself is technically multiplied by 1, so we can really imagine this negative 1 in front. And any number can be written as a fraction by placing it over 1. So that means the slope, even though it was a bit invisible, is really negative 1 over 1. Since slope is rise over run, that means from that starting dot that we made, we will go down 1 because it's negative, and over 1 to the right. Remember, with rise over run, the rise and the positive negative go together. So if we rise positive or rise negative, that controls up or down. But we always run to the right. If you wish to make a few extra dots just to make an extra straight line, that's always a good idea. But then we need to connect those dots. If we look carefully, we can see that the less than or equal to sign is present, which means that little line underneath that represents equals to means we have a solid line to draw. Solid meaning straight across, no dashes or breaks. Once we graph our line, we then need to pay attention to the fact that y here is less than or equal to. The direction that little mouth is facing relative to the y, that tells us about our shading. So since y is less than or equal to the rest of the expression, that means we need to shade the region where it's less than or equal than the y value we marked. So since we're talking about the y-axis, the values less than where we started are all the ones down beneath the line. So we're going to shade that region. Now you'll notice I'm shading particularly lightly here, and that's because we have a whole nother inequality to graph. Once we get both of them, then we can look at where that overlap occurs. So we've gotten the first one. Now the second one. X is greater than negative 3. This one isn't in an mx plus b type format like the first one was, so we can't really graph it the same way. All we can do is use what they gave us. The x-axis at negative 3 would mean we start with a dot there. Now, we can interpret such an expression to mean that we are talking about a line that goes through the x-axis at negative 3. The only way we can draw a line that goes through the x-axis at negative 3 is a vertical line that cuts through that axis at that point. Before we draw the line, let's be sure it says x is greater than. There's no little line underneath for equal to, which means we're going to use a broken or a dashed line.